So his next piece I want to dedicate to my friend Don Bell. You didn't see that one coming? Who is such a musical genius. Thank you, Don and Gina, for coming. The shoes of the fisherman's wife are some jive-ass slippers, or so I hear, after Mingus. He survives on 2 hours sleep so she can have them in turquoise, coral, beet red, blood red, sky blue, navy, white, taupe, azure, silver, and emerald, all shapes, stilettos, ballet flats, platforms, open toe, peep toe, knee-high and thigh-high boots. Sometimes he must dive deep into the ocean. There is only so much his little pole can do. He dives and can hold his breath for 3 hours underwater. He finds a 12-foot fish at the bottom of the ocean and wrestles it, snapping it in two, just below the head, right above the fin. He pulls its lifeless body to the rim of the ocean. The fish bobs and bobs, its open mouth releasing a last breath. He sells the meat, the bones, and the scales, all to get that woman her shoes. The floors of their home are always wet with what he brings in from outside, rainwater, slime from the fish's wet, lifeless body, the liquid of blood and ocean mixed together. He walks upstairs, finds her looking out to the river. Mermaid mama, he calls out to her, and she turns to look at him with eyes that turn from brown to blue as she says, "You took me from my home, and now I am your prisoner, man, and I am your love." There was another woman before this woman for whom he had to catch fish after fish, not to keep her feet happy and keep her at home, but because fish was the only meal she would have. Fish fried in grease, fish sauteed in butter, raw fish drizzled with lemon juice, seared scallops, fish baked in oranges and lime, shrimp coated in avocado oil and sizzled to a crisp like popcorn. "Man," she'd say to the fisherman, "if you don't come back here to this house with some fish, my skirt will stay forever lowered and ever and ever and ever, and you will never know again why this black is the best ocean in the world." That is what she said each time he left home at 3 a.m. And while he'd be out there holding his little stick, he'd think of her black ocean and black skin and black hair and her sweet fish water breath and the way her hands moved over his body like she meant to cover him millimeter by millimeter with iridescent scales. And yes, he would kill fish and men who would keep him from killing fish to get back to her black, wet water, the net that snared him each time he vowed to leave. And there was this once when he thought it was a mammoth of a fish that he saw just out yonder, a cerulean tail that flashed up high above the water. And he said, "As long as that fish is alive, I am one step closer to being away from my woman." So he ripped off his shirt and swam to that place in the ocean, then dove down into the deep and pulled hard on its tail and pulled some thick, ropey hair. And he wondered what manner of fish this was, but he would not turn loose the tail, though the fish was faster than any fish he had ever held, slippery between his mighty hands. He dragged it all the way to the top of the water and threw it into the boat. She gasped, and he looked up, then realized it was a she and not an it, and was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen, with her long rope of black hair and her sparkling eyes that looked brown one way, blue the next. And she began to beat him with her tiny fists, her breasts wet and heaving and slapping against her skin, and she shrieked like a pig, and he could understand, though she did not say this. "Put me back where I come from, you jive-ass bastard." But he could not, would not do that. No way, no how. So he answered in English. She understood. "I got to serve you till I die, and I got to take you home to be my wife." Her wide fishtail turned then into two legs, and the black space between them glistened, and she did not fight, because when she looked above, he was no longer a man, but a great looming moon god, or water god, or moon water god. And his shoulder was the tide, and his mouth was the foam of the tide, and his hands were all the places water has ever landed since water was water. And she reached for him, and they were no longer man and fish woman, but husband and wife. Meanwhile, the human fish-eating wife waited for days in their shack, starving and worrying her mind to death if she'd asked the man for too much, and if that's why he left her. Her skirt remains lowered to this day, and all the hair she owns have all turned gray. And if you listen close enough, you can hear her weep sometimes. And sometimes, when the ex-wife of the fisherman weeps, so too does the mermaid wife, and they are the two weeping wives of the fisherman. The mermaid wife only lets out her tail every once in a while when he comes in from fishing and brings buckets of water and dumps it into a big tin tub long enough to fit a woman who becomes 7 feet tall when covered in water. Her 2 legs get all zipped up and scaled up and turn a magnificent kind of bluish green like the ocean itself, and he rubs her tail and scales and all over, and she moans and slaps him and says in perfect English, often while still moaning, "I want to go home." He grabs her hand and says, "Well, why don't you? You got 2 legs, you ain't no fish all the damn time." She says, "Well, I would, but I believe you put a curse on me that night you dragged me from the water. All I want to go home, but then again, if I go home, you can't come with me, and I got to have you too." And he climbs in the tub and knocks out all the water, and her beautiful fin becomes beautiful legs again, spread ocean wide, and they become snatches of breath and promises of love and never leaving. And with a gasping breath, she screams, "Well, get me my shoes. I want shoes, you good love-giving mother." That's how it began. Each day he had to come home with a new pair of shoes that could look nothing like the pair from the previous day, and no color could be the same in a week. The first pair was red, gold, and blue wedge heels that snaked up the ankle. The second day was black and gold check 6-inch stilettos. The third was hot pink glittery ballerina flats. Each night he'd shiver into her, and she'd sing his name 1 minute and beg for home the next, screaming, "I miss my family." He'd grab a fistful of her black ropey hair, bury her nose in the center of her throat, and mumble, "You ain't got no home but me, no family but me. You all mine now, just like I'm all yours." The next morning, when he went away to fish, she put all the shoes in the middle of the floor and set them aflame. "I'm a fish woman," she said out loud. "What the hell I need with shoes."